Hold
Here's
the
a design
lattice steady.
problem no modern engineer would take.
Lift the center pole
Keep
now.
20 people and
Secure the felt, the
500
wind is
animals
rising.
alive through a winter that reaches 50 degrees below zero. Your budget includes no electricity, no firewood, no concrete, and no foundation of any kind. And the entire structure has to come apart and travel in under an hour. At that temperature, the physics stop being theoretical. Steel snaps like glass under a hammer. Oil stiffens into wax, and the air itself changes. Sound carries strangely through cold that dense, so a herd 2 kilometers away can be heard as if it were standing just beyond the wall. Out on the Mongolian steppe, the numbers were all zeros. 0 forest, 0 stone walls, 0 foundation, 0 fuel anyone could dig out of the ground. So the question isn't how they endured it. The question is what this machine was running on. Because it ran.
For 8 centuries it ran, through winters that would empty a modern town in a week, and it never once failed the people inside it. And if it had failed, it wouldn't have failed at random. It would have failed at a specific hour. Not midnight, 4 in the morning. We'll come back to that, because everything in this system was built to reach it. Picture the frame of one of those tents. Wooden lattice, darkened to the color of honey by decades of cooking smoke, passed from a grandmother to a mother to a daughter. Taken apart and raised again more than 3,000 times. That frame never had an address. It also never failed. Every structure has one decision that can't be undone later. For a tower, it's the foundation. For a Mongol family, it was choosing where to stop walking. Everything else could be adjusted through the winter. More felt, a bigger fire, a tighter circle. But the ground under you was permanent the moment the poles came off the cart.
And the steppe does not forgive a bad choice. It's wider than Western Europe, and the wind coming off Siberia crosses 1,000 kilometers without meeting a single obstacle. By the time it reaches you, it isn't blowing anymore. It's grinding, taking heat off a body the way a file takes metal off a bar. So they read the land instead of guessing at it. A shallow depression means less wind at ground level. A line of rock means a storm breaks apart before it arrives. Most of all, they looked for the southern face, the slope that turns toward the sun, and they called it finding the shadow of the mountain. This wasn't a small domestic decision. Herding once fed close to a third of the population of Mongolia, which means a bad winter didn't just take a family, it shook an entire economy. The Mongolians even have a word for that kind of winter, zud. And the timing mattered as much as the place. Leave early, and the herd loses its final weeks of feeding. Leave late and snow shuts the roots behind you in hours. So they measured the animals, but never with scales. A herder ran a hand along the spine and shoulder to feel the fat sitting under the wool. That fat was the battery, and every battery had to be full before the first snow. But there's a mistake at this stage, a quiet one, made before winter even starts, that could kill a whole camp. One tent alone on open ground is a body standing naked in the wind. However well it's built, the air wraps all the way around it and pulls heat off every surface at once. So the answer was never to reinforce a single structure. It was to make structures work together. They set their tents in a ring, a formation called a kuri, and it was never decoration. It was aerodynamics performed by an entire community. Because the cold that kills you doesn't drop from the sky. It crawls, a low current sliding along the ground, stripping warmth from everything in its path. A ring of walls lifts that current up and sends it over the camp instead of through it. Inside, the wind speed falls. The snow settles in different places, and a microclimate forms that you can't see but can measure. At the center of that ring stood the heater, not the fire, the herd. Hundreds of animals pressed together, each one producing almost nothing on its own, together raising the temperature around them by as much as 10 degrees. Think about what that actually is. A furnace that spends all summer walking out to gather its own fuel and brings it back inside its own body. Nobody burned the herd. They kept it alive, and it paid them back in heat every night of the winter. Now the mistake. The obvious place to camp is the deepest hollow in the land because it feels the most sheltered. It is also a trap. Cold air is heavier than warm air, so at night it slides downhill and pools in that hollow like water filling a bowl. The safest looking ground becomes several degrees colder than everything around it all night, every night. Beginners choose the bottom. Experienced families choose a gentle slope where the cold keeps moving instead of settling on them. Because the ring makes no heat of its own. It only buys time. And the time had to stretch all the way to 4 in the morning. Step inside. The round shape isn't style, it's function. No sharp corners for the wind to catch, so the air slides around the outside instead of pressing into it. And the domed roof spreads the weight of heavy snow evenly across the whole frame instead of loading one beam until it breaks. The walls are felt, wool compressed until the fibers lock into each other and trap millions of tiny pockets of still air. And still air is one of the best insulators nature produces. In a hard winter, they stacked it up to 12 layers deep, 50 below outside, 30 to 40 degrees warmer inside. Still cold, just no longer lethal. And there's a reason it had to be felt rather than cloth. Woven fabric has a grid of open channels running through it, so wind passes straight between the threads, no matter how thick you weave it. Felt has no weave at all. That's why a thin sheet of it stops wind that a heavy blanket never could. At the center burns a fire, with no wood in it, because there are no trees. The fuel is dung, gathered, dried, and cured in open air until it burns hot, clean, and steady. In a land with no forest, nothing is waste. Directly above it sits the tuna, the ring at the crown of the tent. Hot air rises out through it, and that draws fresh air in through the gaps near the floor.
Hold the lattice steady!
A convection cycle running all night.
Lift the center
with no
pole
moving
now!
Parts, and
Secure
no one
the
tending
felt!
it.
The wind is rising!
Without that opening, carbon monoxide, colorless and odorless, could take a sleeping family before anyone woke up. On the coldest nights, newborn animals came inside and were laid beside the sleeping mats, not out of tenderness, but out of arithmetic, because each small body gives off heat until morning. Nobody undressed. Children slept in the middle. The oldest slept nearest the fire. So what was this machine running on when they started with nothing? Not fuel. Arrangement. Which way the ground faced, what shape the walls made, how far apart things stood, who lay down where. Not one item on that list costs money or has to be pulled out of the earth. We solve cold by burning more. They solved it by ordering things better. That's the whole difference, and it's why their system never ran out. So why 4 in the morning? Because by then the ground has given up every bit of warmth it absorbed during the day, and the sun is still hours from returning. The fire inside the tent burned down long ago. That hour is the floor of the night, the coldest point on the whole curve, and everything they did through autumn was aimed at it. Where to stop walking, which way the door faced, how many layers of felt went on the frame, where the herd stood. None of it was about surviving winter as an idea. It was about carrying every living thing in that camp across one specific hour, and then doing it again the next night. Survival there was never measured in seasons. It was measured in mornings. And when the first light finally reached the felt, the first thing anyone did was not warm their hands. It was count the herd. That fuel-less machine ran for 8 centuries. No foundation, no permanent walls,
no address. Taken down at sunrise, standing again by nightfall. Nothing fixed, nothing wasted, nothing left behind. And that smoke-darkened frame, raised 3,000 times, didn't last because the wood was good.
It lasted because every single time it came apart, someone still remembered exactly how to put it back together. The structure was never really the tent. The structure was the memory. We build tighter houses now, warmer ones, and we hang all of it on a single power line. 3 days without electricity in deep winter, and most of us would not know what to do. They never had a line to lose. What else once ran on nothing at all before we took it apart? Subscribe and come further into the forgotten engineering of survival.